Welcome to the regular May meeting of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will follow our usual procedure this evening, which is to say we'll take the cases in the order in which they appear on the agenda. I'll ask the appellant to come forward, be sworn in and seated in the chairs to my right, and to offer any testimony that he or she would like us to hear. We ask that the appellants confine their testimony, if at all possible, to a 10-minute interval. Following that, when the appellant has concluded their testimony, we will ask them to step down, and then I will solicit testimony from anyone in the audience in favor of the appeal, and then anyone in the audience in opposition to the appeal. And we will check in with code enforcement to see if there are any comments from that office. And then, if any information has been put forward that seems to justify factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification, not new arguments, prior to our closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. Under most circumstances, the board will act on each case before moving on to the next one. Our first case this evening is case 2018, Sign Technologies, Inc. for GTY Mass New Hampshire Leasing, LLC. The applicant wishes to install 2 new building signs on an existing car wash and requests a variance to Article 2869B, permitted building signs, to permit a sign on the Loudon Road frontage to be 128 square feet, where a maximum sign area of 52 square feet would be permitted, for property located at 24 Loudon Road in the GWP Gateway Performance District. Is there anyone here from Sign Techniques? Please come forward.
Hello.
You swear to tell the truth?
Yes, I do.
Would you give us your name as you testify, please?
John Lemansky, 1163 Shed Hill Road, Stoddard, New Hampshire.
Lemansky is spelled?
Lemansky.
Thank you, Mr. Lemansky. Please proceed.
Well, we have, there's an existing exit sign at the car wash. Does everyone have the sketches?
We do.
Okay. There's an existing exit sign when there was a Shell car wash. The canopy was installed afterwards, kind of blocks that whole facade. So we couldn't reface that with the new company that moved in. So we were asking to put the clean car exit sign on the outside of the canopy. And that's the 2-foot lighted sign.
Actually, John, that was not included as part of the application because you have 2 frontages, frontage on Gully Hill Road and frontage on Loudon Road. We're only here tonight for the one facing Loudon Road.
Oh, just that one?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought the paperwork said 2 signs.
It did originally, and I communicated that to somebody, but it must not have gotten to you. So
okay.
It's just the Loudon Road frontage is exceeding what's allowed.
So the second one, or I guess the only one on the agenda tonight, was refacing this sign along Loudon Road. The previous sign that was there had small lettering that said car wash on it. They had about a third of it blue, the rest of it, the fascia was yellow, and they had a small car wash on it, not very visible. So we were hoping to reface that sign with something a little bit bigger. The situation there is they have quite a bit of trees blocking the road. When you're coming down Loudon Hill, if you're going up, you have a little bit better visibility. But because the car wash is situated behind the convenience store and the gas station, they have limited visibility, which is why the last car wash closed up. So we're hoping to revamp it and do a little bit more marketing and signage.
What was the original square footage of the sign?
It's difficult to tell. It depends on how you calculate it. It was this same area, but a third of it was blue, 2/3 was yellow. And in the yellow portion, it said car wash. That's it right there.
So it was the smallest rectangle that fit around the car wash
itself.
Area there, yeah.
Are you looking to fill out basically that banner to
The entire blue and yellow area, yes.
Are the trees on your property or the city's property?
Pardon me?
Are the trees on your property?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry.
Looks like they might be within the city right-of-way, at least this clump here. That one might be right along the property line.
So would you say that your property is distinctive in this area because of the hill, that it makes it the signage more difficult for people to see unless it's bigger?
Yeah, the grade and the trees as well. I mean, we looked at possibly putting another pylon sign there, but they're only allowed one per property. And the pylon that's existing is to the left of the gas station, right in the corner there, yeah.
It looks from the site plan like your building is something in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 feet from the road, from the center of the nearest car lane. Is that about right?
I'd say that's a fair guesstimate, yeah.
So Craig, in a situation like this where there's multiple structures and apparently it's being operated, the car wash is an independent business, is the total signage is the same as if it was just one structure?
No, it's calculated based on each individual structure. So they would be allowed to have, approximately 52 square feet of signage on that building by right, on the Loudon Road side.
And the sign that you'd like to have is what?
128.
128?
So the convenience store has its own sign that's separately...
Correct.
It gets its own signage.
Right, the frontage is calculated for building signage based on each individual building on the property.
Other questions from the board? Jim, anything?
Yep. I'm good, thank you.
Andrew? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Nothing to add at this point.
All right. With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have a request to put essentially an expanded sign on the northern facade of an existing car wash. We heard testimony that the existing sign band is obscured partly by trees that belong to the city, and that the lot is configured in such a way that it makes it difficult to see the building. Discussion? Andrew, what do you think?
I think the way you just described it, kind of put your finger on it, why the property is distinguished from others in the area, because of the trees and because of the hill, that it makes signage more, less effective. So I think that is a justification for a bigger sign. It's also, it's not too close to its neighboring businesses, like when you get down Loudon Road. So I don't think it creates as much clutter as if there's a lot of huge signs all in a row.
Anyone care?
I think there's I personally think that's too much on this particular building. I can understand that they're allowed building signage on the road, and I could see that if they wanted to maybe move that golden nozzle car wash down a little bit further, but there's a lot going on. There's too much.
Okay. Jim, what do you think?
I think there's some hardship associated with the trees on the city's property blocking the signage opportunity. But maybe Rob is right. Maybe reorienting the allowable signage might be a better approach than. That's what I'm thinking, but I haven't decided yet.
Okay. Nick?
Well, I'm certainly persuaded by the hardship argument that the trees do pose a problem for him, since they're not his trees and he has no control over those trees. And then you compound that with the fact that you've got a downhill characteristic of the road there, so people are going pretty fast, and the time to absorb the message on the sign is challenged with the lack of visibility. So I'm persuaded that there is the hardship case here to perhaps be a little more flexible in allowing a larger sign.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone care? Well, it sounds like we got a board with differing opinions. Anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to grant the variance. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
The vote is 3-2 with Mr. Monahan and Mr. Harrison in the minority. The variance is granted.
Got you right.
We are going to skip over the next case temporarily because we need another board member. Oh, she is here? Oh, I didn't see her. We're not going to skip over the next case temporarily. We are going to switch out board members due to a conflict of interest. The next case is 2118 Warren Street Architects. The applicant wishes to build a 28-foot 6-inch by 12-foot plus or minus width by depth addition to a total of 1,389 square feet of additional floor area on 3 floors on the west side of an existing building, and requests a variance to Article 2841H, the Table of Dimensional Regulations, to permit no less than a 2-foot setback from the westerly side property line to the closest point of the addition, where a 15-foot side setback is required. Variances to Article 28.7, access, circulation, parking, and loading, to provide no less than 2 non-compliant on-site parking spaces where 17 spaces are required, to provide no compliant on-site parking spaces, to provide no parking lot perimeter landscaping, to provide no on-site refuse loading area, and to provide no on-site accessible parking, all for property at 27 Warren Street in a CVP Civic Performance District. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Mr. Hawley, would you please identify yourself for the record as you testify?
My name is Jonathan Hawley. I'm a principal with Warren Street Architects. I'm actually the owner of 27 Warren Street. I'm here to ask forgiveness of the board. If you knew how angry I am with myself, you would be scared. But I have already apologized to Craig. And Craig, please correct me as I go along here if you feel the need. The essence of the variances are essentially the same that I was granted 2 months ago. The issue here tonight is an issue of net to gross square footage. So when I asked my staff to put a plan together, apparently what we did is they took the lease numbers that we were using, which were net square footages for the property. So that's the inside paint face of the walls. And the way that the zoning code reads, that the parking calculations and all of the calculations should be net, should be gross outside of wall square footages. So the 2 variances and all of the parking issues, which had been granted 2 months ago, are all affected by the square foot numbers being increased, if you will, which are explained, and I don't know if you all, before you open that big roll of drawings, but there's a small drawing here which explains the existing building and the proposed building, the red being the net numbers, the black being the gross numbers. So if you look at this, so let's just for the moment say I came in 2 months ago with the net numbers, which would have been the net square footage would have required 12 parking spaces, and the gross, by adding the thickness of the outside wall, and the 2 mechanical rooms inside, which weren't calculated before, requires 13 parking spaces. That requirement of either 12 or 13 is not consistent with the variance that I got 10 years ago when I moved into the building. That's fair to say, Craig. So we're here, we're starting all over. When you take that same calculation, basis for calculation in terms of net and gross, and you go to the 3 at the bottom, and you look at this across the bottom, the one addition to that calculation is in the 2 months since I was here last, I actually had the foundation priced to put in. And the difference between a full basement and a crawl space was $2,000. Seems to me a no-brainer. I get storage space, I would go for that. So that is adding in, if you will, what was unoccupiable space prior, which wouldn't have been calculated, and adding in the gross of what that basement would be. So essentially, I'm here tonight to ask for, and Craig has done a thorough reevaluation of my situation. The variance requests that are listed here. I'm happy to go through the hardships. I think Craig would probably be better to go through essentially what was approved and what the difference is today. Circumstances are the same. I have talked to my direct neighbor, the three gals that live at 29 Warren Street. They're still excited about me moving or adding on to the building towards them. But I did not ask for additional letters of support this third time around. So I'll stop there and see if Craig wants to jump in.
No, I think you pretty much accurately described the situation. Again, I think the main increases in gross floor area are coming from the addition, and you're also going to occupy space in the basement that you were not previously calculating towards square footage.
What is, so it's the difference in the number of parking spaces that
Well, when the
square footage affects?
Exactly. When the square footage goes up, the requirement for the additional parking, so hence I don't meet the variance prior.
So how many more parking spaces don't you have
So it goes.
than you didn't have before?
Yeah, what's the difference between
Yeah, so
previous approval?
with the addition, I will have 2 spaces on the property, and the requirement would be 17.
Okay.
Versus previously, it would have been 13, but if we go back to the variance 10 years ago, for some reason, it was 5.
Well, actually, I think it was 7, because there were 2 shown behind the building, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
Yeah.
Either here
That
or
was
there, I
based on
don't
a
have enough
2,000
parking.
square foot
So
gross area.
Right. Yeah, well, 10 years ago is, I'm sure the board was absolutely correct in everything it did, but we're here now, so we're dealing with this. Now, the design of the building is the same as in your earlier appeal?
Yes, except for the fact that it was a crawl space before, and it would be a full basement. It would have no windows, it's just basically basement space that I would have the ability to put plans and files in storage.
And your planned occupancy of the building is the same?
Yes, still my office in business use.
Which, do I recall correctly that you were not planning on an expanded staff? You were just planning on an expanded building?
Yep.
Okay.
So all the other variances that you list here, those aren't really impacted. The only one that's impacted is the parking requirement.
While we're here, Craig, again, correct me if I'm wrong, in the whole reassessment going all the way back to what had been granted 10 years ago to where we stand today, we're trying to bring everything up to make sure. So up until now, I don't remember the issue of refuse loading being an issue or getting a variance the last time around for that?
Yeah, essentially, this is a new case, new hearing, just because it's too difficult to try to compare and contrast with what's happened before. Based on the information presented to you today, that's the way it needs to be looked at.
So we already approved, for example, the setback, and nothing's changed about that.
Yes, nothing's changed about that.
It's just the number of parking spots.
So it's two non.
Requirement is
Exactly.
gone up.
Yep.
Okay.
How many of us heard the other case? Nick, you did.
I've got it right here.
Jim, did you?
It was the chair, myself, Andrew, Rob, and Jim.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wasn't here.
So Laura has not heard the other case.
No, I did read the packet. I read the packet in advance, and it was a surprise to me that this had been heard before because I didn't sit the last time. So I might have been a little helpful, but again, every case is different, so I reviewed it and based it on a new application, so.
Do you have any questions about the configuration of the addition or the rationale that he's used?
No, the material that was provided was sufficient. I had no questions, really.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just for the record, when we looked at this, item 1, 2, A through D were passed unanimously, 5-0 vote, and item E was passed with a 4-1 vote.
What was item E?
Item E was to provide no on-site accessible parking.
Okay. Board members have any other questions? Andrew, any questions? Jim?
Yeah, I don't know if this may be a question for Craig, or the applicant. What is the handicap parking requirement for this space?
It would be one van accessible parking space.
Okay. And is that allowed, are you going to have one van accessible parking place? And is that not listed on the variance, request for variance?
It's the accessible parking.
Accessible
Yeah,
parking.
and item E, to provide no on-site accessible parking.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember who the one was. I think you were the one on
May
that
have
4-1
been.
vote.
Mr. Monahan, if I could just speak to that.
Yeah.
We have a shared driveway between myself, 27, and 29. Dimensionally, the driveway is roughly 9 to 10 feet wide. My property line in the center of the pavement. During the day, the girls are not there, and we don't use their parking space. So essentially, there is the space that would be required, but it's not on my property. It's the adjacent 10 feet of driveway lane that is left open. We don't park in their driveway. Dimensionally, I couldn't put 9 plus 5 true van accessible space between the building and my property line.
That would be true regardless of any of this, right?
Yeah, dimensionally, you
just
can
don't
see where
have-
my truck is parked? From the building to the center line of that double driveway is my lot. So if you were to assume that my truck was a van, that other driveway is available for them to load to the car, but it's not my property.
Any other questions from the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone here who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Is there any further comment from code enforcement?
No, if you got questions, I can try to answer.
All right, very bless you. With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. This case is actually a revisitation of a case that we have already heard and acted on, but we hear testimony that the calculations of the area were partially in error and design has changed, which also has an impact on the calculation of area, which, as I recall, meant that there would be an additional 3 parking spaces that would be needed above what we approved before.
17, I have to look at the...
What's 13 at 17 now?
So additional 4.
What do they have?
What, how many spaces did they need before?
Oh, before we needed.
I'm not finding the...
Before they needed, it says 10, according to
You got it
the
right there in your minutes, don't you?
What are you looking for?
The number of parking spaces.
So they needed 10 and they now need
They
17?
needed to provide no less than 1 non-compliant on-site parking space where 10 spaces were required. It was back in December.
Okay, so, and now they need 17?
Yes.
Okay.
Seems like a big
It is a
jump.
big leap for measuring the inside of the wall versus the outside of the wall.
Well, there was the basement added.
And now
too.
there's finished,
basement, okay.
finished
Yeah,
space.
there's a 3-floor addition, and they're also utilizing the basement at this point.
What's the multiplier? Is it 300 or 200 square feet?
1 per 300 square feet of gross floor area.
On all floors?
Yes.
Okay.
It used to be 1 per 200 on the first and 1 per 300 on all the other floors.
Okay.
But
When is a basement, is a basement always counted?
Generally, a basement should be counted if it's, habitable, usable area. You can use it for storage, which frees up square footage on other floors. I don't think the basement was previously counted. In fact, I know it wasn't. I don't know what it was used for, but in this renovation, they're showing that it's going to be conference rooms, storage areas, and other.
I just don't recall that, I don't want it to affect this case, but we don't typically
Well,
deal with basements in commercial buildings and.
well, actually, no, we do normally. Again, the definition of gross square footage is, the gross square footage on all floors from outside wall to outside wall, which would include basements. It excludes attics and, open balconies, things of that nature. So.
Okay, thanks.
So it's not that they change any plans, it's just, it was a calculation issue from before, they didn't.
Essentially, yeah.
Well, and they're finishing the basement.
Oh,
There's gonna be
that-
a crawl space before.
Oh, that's right, yeah, okay.
Any other questions for Craig? All right. I guess that takes care of the summation. Went from 10 parking spaces required to 17 parking spaces required, and they have one, I believe, on the property, or two. Discussion?
I was just looking at the minutes from before, and based on just to refresh my memory about at least what my reasoning was, and the change doesn't affect my reasoning. I mean, they're not even close to the number of parking spaces with or without a variance at this point. And so, I mean, their existing use, obviously they weren't close, and I think it's a good use of the space because it's close to downtown, and they have the parking spaces in that lot near them that they can use as many as they need.
That's not
true.
on the record. There's nothing tying those spaces to this property, so that cannot be considered.
But did we consider it before?
It was
in the
brought to
record.
your attention that they are available, but unless the spaces are tied to the property through a permanent lease easement or something of that nature, they do not count towards parking.
Okay. Let's see. Just looking for those minutes.
Laura, any thoughts?
No, I didn't sit for the other case, but I do know the property. I think it's a good use of the property to do the expansion. I do have concerns about the fact that there's not accessible parking, but there is not accessible parking now for handicap parking. So this doesn't make it worse, but that is always a concern of not having that at a commercial building.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm inclined to support everything but 2E, which is the request for not having on-site accessible parking.
Nick?
I'm inclined to support all the items of that, and also the character of Warren Street is such that there is really no parking for anybody. And so their situation is typical of what everybody else is facing in that area.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
I would move to approve all of the variances.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Or should we split them because, should I move, let me strike that earlier motion. I'll move to approve all of the variances except for the accessible. So I would move to approve variance 1 and variances 2.
A through D?
Yes, 2A through D.
All right.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are granted except for E. Is there a motion concerning 2E?
I move to deny 2E.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to deny 2E, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Hey.
Nay.
Hey.
The motion fails, 3-2. Do we have a new motion?
So I'd move to approve variance 2E.
Is there a second?
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Paperwork, sorry.
All opposed?
No.
No.
The vote is 3-2. The motion carries. The variance is granted. And that takes care of all the issues on that case.
Thank you. I'll give my seat back.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
I'll be back.
No problem. And if you can pass those down, this is for Craig.
Is this something unrelated to Craig?
Yes, that's something just I picked up for him.
You got a special present, Craig.
I know what it is. Thank you.
All right, next case this evening is case 2618, Robert H. Nichols. The applicant wishes to expand and modify an existing single-family dwelling and create a two-family dwelling and requests a variance to the table of principal uses to permit a two-family dwelling where such use is not permitted for property located at 29 Cemetery Street in an RS residential single-family district. Swear to tell the truth.
I do.
Mr. Nichols, would you identify yourself for the record as you testify, please?
Robert Nichols, 29 Cemetery Street, Concord.
What would you like us to know?
My wife and I have owned our land there in Cemetery Street a long time, 46 years. It goes back 3 different major zoning changes I've seen. And the zoning change before the current one, our lot was in the RC residential suburban zone, and that allowed a two-family with a special exception. And then there was a major subdivision all around us, like an L, big subdivision. And then when they did the current zoning now, then they just made all of that area to Cemetery Street, single family. Whereas the zone right behind Pico Drive, up to the top, that's my lot there. And then the subdivision, you can see the street. And above that is the RM zone, and the RM goes up towards Mountain Road in the back and comes back around Shawmut Street and down Shawmut Street. And in the RM, it does allow by right a two-family house. Most of where I'm located on Cemetery Street and my neighbors, because the land is wet there, we don't have a storm sewer. The nearest storm sewer is on Shaker Road. The land is wet. There's still, on mine, about half is buildable and half is wetland. I own the 2 other lots. They're acre lots. I subdivided those in 1979, so I've had those a long while. On the left side, the rectangular lots. And my other neighbors to the right of me, Mr. Locke, we all have very large lots. His is 4.5 acres. And then to the right on the corner of your picture, on that house, their name is Nichols also. It doesn't help our mail. but their lot is large too. Their lot is 8 acres. And then down at the bottom, on the far right side, across the street, is a 5-acre lot. So even though we're in a single-family zone, I calculated that on my 1-acre lots and my 7.2 acres, size-wise, in that single-family zone, it's about 40% the size of all of White's Park, to get a perspective of how big it is. And you can see it's all wooded all to the back. Nobody behind me, because of the woods, can see an addition I'm putting on. And even the red house, my neighbor in the front, they can't see the addition either from the line of sight. And then across the street from me all along, if I could, from Cemetery Street all along this line here, going south, is city-owned Pine Grove Cemetery, and that's about 10 acres. The thing with that is it has made somewhat of a hardship because the sewer line is at Randolph Road, farther down to the right on Randolph, right there. And to drag it down would be quite a distance and an expense to drag it down and then go in. With the cemetery always being there, then you never had cost sharing on their side if someone would extend the sewer. Usually it's shared on both sides of the street, whoever wants to drag it down. So whoever would need to bring it down would have to pay the full cost of it, which becomes prohibitive. And that's why I'm looking at a two-family addition, so I don't have to bring it down. The expense would be way too much. Another point is, because I have 7.2 acres in the zone, it's single family, but it also, if you have over 5 acres and have municipal services, we have the water on the road. We just don't have the sewer. You'd have to extend it. You could, by right, put in an elderly housing project, age 55 or over, depending 6 units per buildable acre. And on my end, it would be about 20 units. You could do attached or two families or single families up to that amount. But that's big expense and a lot of impact to the neighborhood. I just as soon have an addition for a two-family. And originally what happened, I gave you pictures. I don't know if you had the pictures on. Yeah. How this came about was we've been under construction about 3 years, plus or minus. I got my original building permit to do a master bedroom suite, and then it grew towards the back. The building grew. Then I made a 8-foot addition in the back by the 24 feet, put a new foundation added on and everything. Because at that time, I read, and the state passed the ADU, additional dwelling unit, in all single-family zones. But there are limits to that ADU, and that's could be the limits why you haven't seen. It requires special exception before you to do an ADU. But anybody, as long as they have a single-family lot and meet the requirements of the setbacks and the area requirements, can do it. So someone with maybe 15,000 square feet could do an ADU. Whereas a two-family, for my purposes, is a lot more useful. I'm older, and my wife and I are building the addition by ourselves. It's as you get older, if we designed it so it could be a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so we could move into it. But also, I'm looking at now versus an ADU. If my children would like to keep the house and rent it out, I certainly, as an owner, would like the ability to rent it out in 2 units, whereas the ADU restricts you to owner occupied in 1 and only renting out 1. So if I go to a nursing home for a prolonged stay, if my wife isn't around, then what are you going to do? Leave 1 unit vacant? basically, that's if you do an ADU, whereas a two-family, you don't have that problem. And also an ADU, Concord passed that they limited it to 750 square feet, and I got up before city council and planning saying 750 for a two-bedroom is way too small, but I didn't get anywhere with that. But I just would like the ability to pass it on to my children and have them rent it one or two with that ability in mind. I guess that's most of it. It's mostly where we're located that we're not really impacting with a two-family with that amount of acreage.
I lost track a little bit of the sewer discussion.
Okay.
I understand that,
It comes up Randolph Road and goes into here for the
right,
subdivision.
and doesn't go up toward your house.
Right, it ends here, so
Right.
someone would have to extend it all the way down and then all the way.
Now, if there were sewer, would you be able to put a two-family in there? Is that the issue, or is it that if there's
I
sewer, you
had
could do
the
it
sewer,
subdivision?
if I put in the sewer, I could do 20 units, say, of elderly over 55 housing.
But
That
not a two-family
I
by
could.
itself?
No, I could do an attached, multifamily, a two-family, or a single. You could do either one, up to 20, say, depending on the buildable acres you have.
But because you don't have the sewer, you can't do a two-family there?
No, because of the RS,
Because of the zone.
it's not allowed in that zone. Across the street, all going, well, when they rezoned the cemetery, the RS came back around the cemetery. So the cemetery's in RS, just like we are in RS. But south of that, going all the way toward Shawmut Street, is in the RN zone. And RN allows a two-family. And there's also, on the corner here, a three-family and then a two-family, because they're in the RN zone.
But what's your point about the sewage, that if you had the two-family, it would be economically viable for you to extend the
It
sewage
wouldn't
out?
be.
It would not be, okay.
No, it cost.
It would have to be
in the
all
hundreds of
development.
thousands for sewer.
Yeah.
Very, very expensive.
If the sewer was in front of his property or extended to his property, he could develop the property differently than a single-family dwelling. He could develop multifamily dwellings for the elderly. Two-family dwelling, again, would not be permitted. Multifamily for anybody would not be permitted, but multifamily for the elderly could be permitted.
I understand.
Oh, so
Depended on setbacks, buffers, lot coverage, usable land, all the above.
So your point being, essentially, if you wanted to spend the money, you could put a 20 unit and extend the sewage out, but you don't want to do that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's less,
Yeah,
it's less intrusive,
impact.
it's less burdensome than what you're proposing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Very good. Other questions from the board?
No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward.
Does it matter where I sit?
No, any one of those 2 or 3 chairs there is fine.
Okay.
You swear to tell the truth?
I do.
May we have your name, please?
I am Amy Nichols, and we have never met. I'm the neighbor.
You're the other Nichols.
I'm the other Nichols whose mail keeps getting confused. Yeah.
Okay. And what would you like us to know, Ms. Nichols?
After hearing what he had said, and I'm definitely more in favor of a two-family dwelling than the possibility of him adding several assisted living for the elderly in that community. I like the fact that it's a lot of woods. I also work for the Forest Society, so I'm a tree hugger. And would like to see it stay that way in that area, so I have no objection to a two-family dwelling as opposed to the alternative that could happen.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Nichols? Thank you very much.